start recording. Looks like we're recording there. And so, hello, welcome to the Fantasy Formula One podcast, where we use fake money to buy real F1 teams to win imaginary points.
Dude, that was the best one.
Man,
that was amazing.
I love it. That was gorgeous. Well, I am Paul. That is Ben. And we are here to talk about all things in the wake of the pre-Azerbaijan, post-Italy race. So, first off, I would like to acknowledge that Ben went in heavy on Ferrari.
I'll tell you what, Paul, the fantasy F1 game is so punishing and so frustrating because you think you go in with a good lead and then your plans just implode in spectacular fashion. It's very Death Star, A New Hope at the end, they ask, and you kind of go, what happened? So, all that being said, when you get it right, oh, that feels
just
good.
Gorgeous.
That's all the dopamine, like it's so nice. and how that worked out for me was last week when we were talking, I was kind of going, you know what, I'm gonna go a little heavier on Ferrari. I'm feeling, I think you can't necessarily go horribly wrong with Mercedes, but I swapped out Lewis Hamilton for Charles Leclerc across the board, and he actually ended up being my 2X driver. So I got above 200 points across all three of my teams.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, Team 1 was 266. Team 2 is 212. We can pull that up real quick.
Yeah, here, let's pull that up.
But actually, you know what? Team 2, I went with Carlos Sainz. Still not terrible. And then Oscar Piastri was my 2X. So it still worked out great. And then my Team 3, which is, again, my much more experimental team, still got 239 points with Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, and then Ferrari as a constructor. So... even a broken clock is right twice a day, and this time I was right on time, and it worked out well. Yeah,
look at that. Your newbie alpha came out on top among everything. And I even used one of my teams. I used my Limitless on. Another team I used my 3X on.
Okay. Yeah.
Or maybe I used my Limitless last week. I used my 3X here. But the punchline is you did really well, man. That Ferrari, that Charles Leclerc, man.
And the thing is, Ferrari is still very much in the conversation. I know that Mercedes went from kind of the awkward, the stepchild to to still a very, very much a player in that top 3, top 4 conversation.
Yeah.
But they have cooled off pretty significantly in that regard, and I think. One thing that has been an interesting factor is Russell and Hamilton have been fairly interchangeable in terms of the value they bring to the table from a fantasy perspective.
That's true.
So, but there is still a different dollar value for them. So I dropped Hamilton, kept Russell because he's a solid secondary point getting driver for you. But Ferrari is still in this. They had a bit of a slump going on, but. They're very much alive, especially in the wake of Red Bull's fall from mechanical grace.
Absolutely, and that's something that we can touch on now. I don't like reporting on what they say on social media and talking about it like it's true.
But let's do it.
Let's do it anyway, because I'm citing F1.com, their social media, and it says has a very stoic picture of Sergio Perez, and it says, Max has come to have similar issues, unquote.
Okay.
So the implication for anybody who's not following it is that Sergio Perez has been under fire for like the last 10 races, talking about how he isn't performing like Max Verstappen. And now suddenly when Max Verstappen has a very mediocre, lackluster race,
sure,
is it because the same things are going on with now whatever's impacting Sergio Perez is now impacting Max Verstappen to the point that Max is not performing.
I have
right.
I have again pulling as much context as you can out of a single sentence.
Yeah,
which is irresponsible, but hey, it's what we do.
Right.
I have feelings about that. I think Sergio Perez is putting himself on way too similar of a platform as Max Verstappen, and Max Verstappen is he's built different. He's got that racing instinct. He had a bad race, and so it's not, now you know how it feels like to be me. No, it's not that at all. Are there significant issues that the team over at Red Bull needs to figure out? Yes. But I think this was a case of Perez doing better than expected and Max doing poorer than expected. Not that and not that they are in a generally similar grouping as drivers.
No, I could see that. And especially because there's been... So So, and I'll ask just so I can, because this is the thing that was impacting that I was wondering.
Yeah.
Has the Red Bull RB20 been falling behind the rest of the pack's performance to the point where Max Verstappen was able to use his once-in-a-generation skill to mask all those defaults, and Sergio Perez, outstanding driver in his own right, doesn't have that savant-like ability, and now either the car is degrading, they brought in upgrades that haven't worked, or it's to the point where Max can't, his talent and skill are no longer able to mask everything, and he is near peer adversaries with Mercedes and Ferrari.
Well, you're mentioning a couple variables there. I think there's certainly an element of that. I just think that the upgrade packages that have been introduced throughout the season have not been on par with the other constructors.
Gotcha.
Max is still fantastic, and that's why you see these 10-second plus dominant wins early on, as other cars have caught up technologically and from a engineering or physics perspective, whichever was the more dominant. I don't know which was the higher impacting science there. As everyone else has stepped up, I think it falls more on the engineering teams with Red Bull, that they have not been able to produce equivalent upgrades to keep the car dominant, so that Max can also then just win by leagues with his skill set. So I think it speaks to his abilities that he's still dogging through the races and turning in generally a top 5, in this case top 7 ranking performance. But I do think that the upgrades have not been on par with the other constructors.
And that's an interesting thing, because one of the rumors I've heard on social media is that there haven't been upgrades, that they have primarily put their money, I don't need that light on, that they've primarily put their money into next year's car already, since they were so far. And again, I haven't been in their meetings. I'm not sure what their development team's doing, but they were so far ahead at the end of last year
that the expectation is that anyone's upgrades will maybe help them catch up a little bit, but they did not expect the level of jump from Mercedes, from McLaren, from Ferrari.
Yeah.
Okay. No.
And arguably, McLaren's the only one that's wrong button. McLaren's the only one that is threatening them for a championship right now.
Yes.
So in the end, they sort of got it right, which that can bring us to as a natural segue into. We'll go back to the fantasy part in a minute. McLaren.
Yeah.
Okay. So for anybody who's uninitiated, there's 2 championships in F1. Well, 3 now that there's fantasy Formula 1, right?
There we go.
So
keep us in the
exactly. So you have the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah.
There is no money in the Drivers' Championship, as far as I've heard. Now, maybe somebody who knows better, you can please correct me. But there's no money in the Drivers' Championship.
Sure.
There's all the prize money goes to the constructor. And of course, as soon as you're the world champion driver, then you get a bunch of accolades and you get a bunch of whatever that way.
Endorsements.
That's where I was
chased down by other. Yep, absolutely.
So, so does a team care about the Constructors' Championship as much as they care about the Drivers' Championship? And the way McLaren's been racing, it doesn't seem like they're valuing the Drivers' Championship because they let both of the drivers race a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because usually there's a thing called team orders, everybody. And as soon as the team is like, all right, whoever is in the lead, you saw it with Max Verstappen, you saw it with Ferrari, with a Mercedes, you see it with Ferrari, you see it with all the other teams, is they're like, okay, this guy's further ahead in the points than this guy. Driver number 2, block, defend, give the lead to the other guy so that he can try and get more points.
Mm-hmm.
To try and win that championship. But this is double-digit points so far that McLaren could have given to Norris, but instead let him fight it out and ended up giving him to Oscar Piastri. And Oscar Piastri isn't in contention. It's all the same for the constructors, but it isn't all the same for the Drivers' Championship. And all of that is just lead up to the question that I have for you for fantasy. How much does that impact your choice of McLaren drivers? Because up until this race weekend, I was in my head, Norris was number 1, Oscar Piastri was number 2.
Sure.
And they're always going to let Norris be number 1 since he's further ahead in the points. And he's the one actually challenging Max Verstappen. But based on this, None.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And so that's where, that's kind of where I was with, you look at Mercedes, you've got Hamilton and George Russell. Hamilton's the sexier pick. He's the, a several-time world champion, but and as a result, he commands an extra $1.5 million, $2 million on any given week.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're turning in a similar performance, take George Russell all day. And that's what I'm seeing with McLaren. But the thing is, Oscar Piastri, this season, he is like eye of the tiger. He's getting P4. He's disappointed. He's getting P3. He's talking about, oh, we left so much on the table. We could have lost it all. This was
for sure.
We could have done so much better. The way he's talking like a champion.
Yeah, he absolutely is.
And so Norris has that higher price point and generally comes in 1 to 2 spots ahead of him at the end. However, Piastri has that potential to win also on any given week. And like you said, McLaren is giving way to letting them race as long as they're grouping high up and close together. It's not this is the Norris show. It's we got Norris and Piastri and we have 2 potential champions here.
Yeah.
So I would go Piastri all day because right now, again, Piastri's $24.2 million. Thanks for pulling that up.
Yep, no problem.
Lando Norris is 26.6. If we look at the last couple of the last maybe 3 races or so, do we see $2 million in difference in value when you come to points per million? I don't know. And that's not something we have to do live here because I'm putting you on the spot.
I just start clicking around, but yeah.
But so that would be the mathematic way to look at it. But from the gut perspective and my very, very fleeting memory, you're getting a lot of value out of Piastri for that $2 million less, which allows you to get another decent driver like George Russell or maybe Carlos Sainz.
Yeah.
And again, Ferrari is very much still in the conversation. Between the two, would I go with Charles Leclerc? Yes, but again, there's a $1.7 million price difference between the two. So,
and so on that point, Carlos Sainz is not. He is obviously the second driver in Ferrari right now. Charles Leclerc is the golden child because he's the one staying on the team.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because Carlos Sainz is off the team next year.
He's Williams bound.
Yeah. Which is going to be super interesting. He's Williams bound, and so Charles Leclerc is obviously the number 1 driver. So anything Ferrari has is going behind Charles Leclerc.
Yep.
At this point. And so that's fine. But if you look at Oscar Piastri, fantasy-wise, he is, the 2.4 million behind, and he's only about 70 fantasy points behind. And he has that eye of the tiger aggression. So does that, I guess, how would you, because I'm not going to lie, I've made some huge mistakes this week. I actually took Oscar Piastri off in favor of Norris.
Okay.
On one of my teams because I'm like, no, he's good, but he's not the number 1 driver.
Well, and again, I think by Formula One logic, you're not wrong for doing that.
Yeah.
But by fantasy Formula One logic, where it's not necessarily about who wins, it's about who gets the best position and affords you the space to have another decent driver or 2 really solid constructors.
Mm-hmm.
That's where things get a lot more gray. That's where we come together here every week to talk about and overanalyze the crap out of this.
So what is your belief about if you can only afford Norris or Piastri?
I would go Piastri because that gives me more space for a stronger team, and I am confident in his performance in any given week.
Okay, I did the wrong switcher, so I had looking at my face while you were talking about that.
No, it's okay.
So Norris, Piastri over Norris because it's more variable, and it's a little bit more gamble, but
again, the moment Lando Norris costs $25.6 million instead of $26.6 million, that's a different conversation. Or the moment Oscar Piastri gets more expensive, then it's like, okay, am I, what am I getting for that drop in value at this point?
Gotcha. Yeah. So what about Ferrari versus Mercedes? Because I went, if we can go back, maybe I navigated away from it. Yep, I went heavy in on Russell because his car crashed and then he did so well later and they were able to get the car back together and no one seemed worried.
Yeah.
And so then I went ahead and 3X'd George Russell. I put Colapinto. Colapinto, thank you.
Yeah.
Who, P.S., we have to touch on, he did come in for $4.5 million. He came in exactly at Sargent's number.
Yeah.
So we have to talk about that. But so I went ahead and used Russell, went heavy in on Russell, and that did not work out for me because he got 13 points, and if you 3x 13 points, you get not too many points.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah. So I know you're a Ferrari, you're a big Ferrari person. You made the Ferrari switch.
I did.
Are you? I mean, I'm guessing based on those results that you're sticking with it.
Yeah, it's one of those that, this week if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And
do you think Mercedes is broke and it should fix it because they've kind of been on a slump recently? And again, just for everybody out there in TV land, we're talking about fantasy Mercedes versus Ferrari.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not fully jumping off the Mercedes train yet, just because some of the slump has just been a series of unfortunate events.
Russell getting disqualified and losing 100 fantasy points. Him touching tires on lap 1.
Yeah.
And then needing to go off the track and having wing damage and having to go in and pit.
Correct. Going from 1-2 to 120.
Yeah.
Is just devastating. So no, I'm not completely cooled off on Mercedes. They're still my constructor across a lot of teams. I'll still keep Russell on my team all day, not as my 2X.
Yeah.
But again, if I can afford him as my secondary driver and not tertiary or fourth or fifth, he's still generally solid. I don't think he just had a great week this week. I think it's more about the resurgence of Ferrari that we're seeing here.
Gotcha.
It's been very interesting. If we go week 1 through maybe week 5, it's there's Red Bull and then there's everyone else, but mostly Ferrari and McLaren dueling it out. And our going line for Mercedes was, oh yeah, they're 2 years behind on development.
Yeah.
So they're kind of a non-issue. Then they figured some stuff out.
That they did.
And it became, oh wait a minute, maybe it's McLaren, Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, and then Ferrari's still in the conversation.
Largely because of Russell.
Correct.
So
yeah. So there was that, but then it became no, McLaren is a league ahead there. They are in their own conversation. So it's I think it goes McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari right now in a muddled second, third.
I could agree with that. Yeah.
And then you got Red Bull with their newfound issues.
Red Bull.
So I'm not cooling off on Mercedes so much as I'm having restored faith in Ferrari. So
and that's what got me last year. I know I keep harping on it, but when it comes to prospect versus suspect, for me, Ferrari is nothing but suspect fantasy wise.
Sure.
Because they burned me last year.
I got you.
And so I'm really concerned that that's the same thing that's going on this year, but I'm just not.
Well, I mean, but it's sneaky because from a fantasy points perspective, even with their slump, even with Ferrari's slump, Leclerc is still the number 3 fantasy driver.
He is.
So to me, a Leclerc George Russell based team is solid, or a Oscar Piastri Carlos Sainz based team, which you can math.
You can work that.
You can math it to work, and that's I think that's going to give you a solid outing. Again, it's not going to be you're generally not going to have the dominant 300 plus point double Yahtzee race, but
and so the strategy I need to look into is some of my teams, because some of my teams are in danger of being out of the top 2%.
Okay.
And that was the whole point, like what I really want to accomplish.
That's our
this
standard.
Year.
That's our standard of success.
Yes, because I finished at the top 3% with one or two of my teams last year, and you didn't play last year. So my goal was to have both of us be in the top, all of our teams, or at least one of our teams, right, be in the top 3%.
Yeah,
and preferably like
higher.
So I don't want. So now that some of that's in danger, my kind of strategy I'm going into is to stop flip-flopping or trying to chase the trends. Just be like, okay, this team is good. Like Mercedes is good. This build, like my Norris, Haas, Red Bull. Like, again, Yuki Tsunoda got a DNF
right,
but he picked it up on the, like, you can't plan for that. That's not his fault. He just got hit. Like, so I want to have, I kind of feel like that it needs to just, we need to hit it, and it needs to just go for a few races and stop chasing it around, at least with me.
Sure.
Because I'm as soon as we take into account what we did race 1, come race 2, it's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Because by all counts, George Russell should have 100 more fantasy points at least.
Okay.
Than he does.
So
now.
This leads me to an interesting question.
Yeah.
That we did not discuss beforehand at all. So I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Love it.
If we don't want to just chase the trends, what would you say right now on the grid as far as constructor quality goes and racing and driver performance? What can you rely on right now? What are the reliables?
The reliables are McLaren, number one.
Okay.
Because there's no indicate like they've been climbing, and Red Bull is not a factor. Right? Red Bull's not truly competitive right now. McLaren's eating into their points.
Yep.
So McLaren number one, and then it's just a toss up between Ferrari and Mercedes, because there's plenty of reasons to think that both Ferrari and Mercedes are going to do good things. Plenty of reasons to look back at them and say, okay, you got to be careful about them. But there's no one else left, and since we only get 2 constructors, you pick McLaren and you pick Ferrari or Mercedes.
There you go.
And you kind of gamble with it.
Sure.
But you can't, like, my issue is I will try and ride. The best way to get the best points is to kind of ride the wave, and then like a stock market, as soon as you think they're going to have a bad race, you hop on the other one, because especially with Mercedes and Ferrari, they eat each other's points.
Yes.
They are a zero sum, by and large, they're zero sum. Right, McLaren's going to get their points. Max Verstappen's probably going to get some points there. But then as soon as Ferrari gets points, Mercedes doesn't. As soon as Mercedes gets points, Ferrari doesn't. So you have to kind of pick which constructor you want to go with. And I don't think you're wrong for saying Mercedes. I don't think you're wrong for saying Ferrari. But one of those guesses is wrong.
Sure. Yeah.
So
and that's I think that summarizes where we are in the season so well.
Yeah.
It's one of these two. It's not going to be both.
Yeah.
And you're not wrong for your logic on either one.
And so I think I'm going to, with my teams, I'm keeping one Mercedes strong.
Yeah.
Just because I can afford it. They're in. Fine. Another one I'm going to keep, kind of make it be kind of like what you have. I'm going to switch one of the drivers to Charles Leclerc.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to switch the constructor to Ferrari, just to try and cover off that, because so then I'll have my team that is Lando Norris, Mercedes, McLaren, Haas, V-Carb, all that.
Yeah.
And then I'll have another team that's Mercedes heavy, and another team that's like Ferrari with Mercedes.
Yep.
Just because since none of my teams are so far, like I'm doing good, but I'm starting to slip out of that top 1%. And that's actually an interesting thing we could do. I realize we could do this. If we go to the leagues, let me click to show everyone
so you can see what we're seeing.
See what we're seeing. So if you go to the public leagues, and hang on, I'm like a click behind. Okay, starter leagues, the global league, you can see who the best in the world is and what they're driving. So I did a little bit of digging. This person has had Porsche F1 has had this build for a minute because you can't afford this build anymore.
Well, yeah. Once you have that, you've got to lock in, and
you got to lock in, and you have to stick with it.
Jumped in on the full McLaren,
McLaren with
Ferrari. Yeah.
So as soon as we look back at the Italian GP, that's what. Oh, look at that! I was wrong. So at the Italian GP, he got Norris, Leclerc, Ferrari, and McLaren. For the Dutch Grand Prix, so this person has surplus money that they can still afford to bounce back and forth between getting a full McLaren with a Ferrari splash.
Oh, and then he 3x'd as well.
Then he 3x Norris, which was So this individual is like, they use their Limitless, and they got Red Bull Racing on it for Belgium. They had Hamilton. Anyways, that's Limitless, but still. So kind of looking at what other people are doing, the teams that went heavy into Ferrari are now the teams that are leading.
Yeah.
But they jumped off, and Hungary was the last time they used Mercedes. So that's not what I did. I stayed with Mercedes a lot longer than they did, but that means they saw something in Ferrari that I didn't, or that I saw and disregarded. So,
yep.
So moving on past this, just because I know we are somewhat under a time limit. Our boy Ollie Behrman.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So let's
talk about the future real quick. So Oliver Behrman
signed to 2025 with Haas.
Yep. Is now replacing Kevin Magnussen for next race, because Kevin Magnussen was the bad boy of F1 and accrued like 10. So after you get 10 basically points on your driver's license, you get a 1 race ban. After you get 12, sorry. He got 10, and then he played good. He kept blocking for his teammate, all this. And last race, he bumped. He rubbed. I forget who he rubbed. I think it was.
I think it was Ocon.
Or it was
Gasly.
Gasly. It was Gasly. Thank you. I was going to say Piastri. I'm like, no, he didn't. He rubbed Gasly, and he got a 10-second penalty and 2 points, and he got his race ban. Putting on my tinfoil hat, I think F1 just really wanted to give him the race ban because he was so elbows out aggressive and said basically, okay, I'll accrue all the points. Let's get going. So, but that's neither here nor there. So they're bringing in Ollie Behrman.
Yeah.
And so the question is what price is Oliver Behrman coming in at?
Oh, that's a tough one.
That's a tough one because he's not driving a Ferrari anymore.
No, but he also is coming into the season with still more fantasy points than half the drivers on the grid.
Yeah.
Because of his 7th place finish with Ferrari.
Yeah.
So, what's Magnussen right now?
Actually, let's go ahead and take a look at that. So Kevin Magnussen is
12.8.
Yeah, so Kevin Magnussen is 12.8 million.
I think because he's still largely unproven, and he's now going to be with a different constructor. Now, again, Haas has been having a year, and man, what a place to be in where, Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg have been playing well together. Magnussen's playing the part of the hockey bruiser.
Yeah.
And then when you lose one of your two guys, you get Ollie Behrman, who everyone's pretty hot on right now.
Yeah.
That being said, I think Ollie Behrman is still largely unproven. Like you said, he got 7th place, but it was in a Ferrari. I see him coming in at, I'm going to say, because it's Haas, they're still kind of the lower tier team. I'm going to say 9.5 mil.
Okay, because right now because F1.com, like the fantasy website, hasn't caught up with this news,
right?
And smart because they're going to make the change once. Oliver Behrman's at 15 million
as a Ferrari.
Yeah. So this is interesting for me because it's going to be a telegraph of how much of Ollie Behrman they think is just the team, not his driving ability.
Sure,
it's going to be a marker about how
the difference between a Haas
and a Ferrari.
Yeah.
A quantifiable number from F1.
But here's the thing: he was 15 before he had ever done an F1 race.
That's true.
So that will be that's a muddling factor in terms of like going from 0 to 1 races. You are infinitely smarter. You still have only done one race, but I think if I ever was in an F1 race, after one race, I would learn a whole heck of a lot about cars and myself.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Excuse me. Okay, so we have
So that's really interesting.
That is. I am super, super stoked to see that. Let me look at my other notes.
While we're kind of in the shallow end of the F1 pool, let's talk Williams, 9th and 12th.
9th and 12th.
So they got real F1 points, which is good for Alex Albon. That's hard fought.
Yeah.
And then but Colapinto ends up in 12th, gets 11 fantasy points. So in one race, eclipses Logan Sargent's. And again, he doesn't have all the DNFs under his belt that Logan Sargent has.
Yeah.
If Logan Sargent didn't have his DNFs, he would have significantly more points. So that's not lost on me. But not bad for a it looks like he went up $500,000. He was 4.8 to start, but now he's 5.3 mil.
Yeah.
Not a bad spot for the cheapest driver available.
No, and I'm keeping him.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, why not?
He's not crashing. You know that this late in the season, he just wants to keep the car.
Yeah.
He wants to stay in the race, show what he can do, and not get in the wall.
Well, and that's the thing. At this point in the season, if you had picked him up last week because you needed some financial space, don't drop him.
Correct.
Because you're never going to get him this cheap again. So he will remain your lowest financial liability unless he crashes out for the next 3 races in a row. I would then consider maybe spending a little bit more on your bottom tier driver.
Completely agree. And I would even go ahead and say get Oliver Behrman on the team too. Like I'm gonna swap out if he's priced right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna swap out Magnussen for Oliver Behrman.
Oh sure. Yeah.
Because there's a non-zero chance as soon as Ollie Behrman goes into and starts doing like amazing things in a Haas,
correct, that
Magnussen loses his seat before the end of the season.
Oh, I see
don't
that.
think they will do it. Like he would have to get like next level performance.
Yeah. He'd have to like somehow get P4 or something like that.
Or something like on merit,
Yep.
So oh gosh.
That's
so
fun,
much going on.
Well,
I love it.
This excites me a little bit for Williams next year because then you got Albon who's who can drive a car. And then you got Carlos Sainz, and you're seeing the upgrades that Williams rolled out with. Even after Logan completely broke the car during FP3 last week, and they're worlds better than they were half a season ago.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. I'm hopeful for them because I know there are a lot of long-suffering Williams fans who are just like, this is our town. No.
No, what's going on?
So again, signing Carlos Sainz is a big deal. If they can get a proper car under him, things will be good.
For sure. Let me see. What else? So there's no race this weekend. And then we have 1 weekend off, and then so we'll have one more episode before there's a race.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to. There's a lot of stuff going on, like pre-race, and so my big advice to everybody, including myself, is to don't lock in anything yet until the last minute, because there's at least going to be there's 2 new drivers on the circuit. This is going to be the first time they've had a F1 driver race for 2 different teams in the same season in a long time, and I'm certain it's happened before. I'm not naive enough to say that it hasn't, but because of all that, I think it's worth saving your switches until we get closer to it.
Yeah. But yeah. So, do you have any?
No, that was no.
So I guess if we're going to summarize this episode this week, because I know we will talk our builds next week.
Yes.
But the takeaways here are: who are you going to pair McLaren with, red or green? Let us know your thoughts in the comments on that. We'd love to hear any feedback, even if it's even if you're just trolling us, we'll take it.
We'll take it.
But let us know why you would choose Mercedes or why you would choose Ferrari, and specifically which drivers you prefer. I'd love to know that. And then in the meantime, there's a lot of fun stuff to watch on the lower end of the grid with let's see how Bearman does, and if he can earn a permanent spot this season, that'd be cool to see. And and best of luck to Colapinto to continue doing good things with what he's got.
No, for sure. All right. Well, hey everybody, we will talk to you next week.
Sounds
I guess.
Good.
Cheers.
That was the best sign off ever.
That was wonderful.
You nailed it.